Okay, thank you so much, Samantha, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm so lucky today because Samantha didn't read the intro. Every time somebody reads my intro, I just want to hide under the table. So hi, my name is Maya Voye, and for the last 10 years, I have been obsessed with the question how to get to product market fit. Why? Because everybody told you that you need this, but nobody was really clear on how to get there. So in this exciting journey, I was working with some really cool companies such as Google, Heineken, Bayer, and whatnots, as well as with a lot of startups. And I tried to join all these science and processes in my best-selling book, Go-to-Market Strategies. So here we are, 6 months post the launch, sharing and caring about all the go-to-market problems. And I'm sure that we are going to have plenty of opportunities to talk more about this today.
Thank you.
My name is Emmett Gibney. I'm the CEO of Rewardful. I've been at Rewardful for a couple of years. If you're not familiar with us, Rewardful is a SaaS tool for SaaS businesses to set up and manage affiliate programs. Yeah, super happy to be here today. Obviously, go-to-market is an issue for any and all SaaS businesses, even us. And happy to share some of the experiences and learnings we've had in the last little while.
Also, I'm Emilia. I'm the head of marketing at UserPilot. I've been with UserPilot for 4.5 years now, so quite a while. Yeah, and obviously as the head of marketing of a B2B SaaS company, going to market is all I'm doing. And over the last 5 years, the market conditions have changed substantially, right? We had this massive spike in essentially VC financing in 2021 and the zero interest rates phenomena, and then it all went down, and we were left with some very noisy and saturated channels, and a lot harder landscape with much less funding to operate on. So, it's been quite a journey to scale this company and this team from me, myself, and I to now 19 people in marketing and over 100 people in the company. So, yeah, I made tons of mistakes on the way, and hopefully I will be able to share some with you today so you don't have to make them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And let us move on here. And that is a really good segue into why we specifically chose this topic. As you could see from our panel's introduction, they are not lacking any expertise. They've made the mistakes. And we want to be able to address some of the misconceptions, be able to share some proven methods, because from those mistakes, the truths were born. And then also for us to empower teams to experiment, because that's the only way you're going to figure it out. So with that note, we're going to start with the foundation of this all, and it is research and planning. And here we have more than 5, but we're going to share a little bit more and start off with Maya, and then continue with Emilia to share your points.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. There was a little bit of question in the chat about the product market fit and whatnots, and what does it actually mean to go to market. And I think that this is a brilliant way to just address this. So we have been working with product market fit with very big companies as well. Every time that they either launch a new product to a new audience, or they are repivoting or something like that, even companies that are hundreds of years old are getting obsessed with these product market fit questions, especially these times when there are so many AI companies and whatnots that kind of eat the market away from them. So that is a very pressing question to these days. What else is pressing? How to prepare for launch and how to do the research. Oftentimes I work with founders that are just a little bit more technical or engineering, and sometimes we just have this premise to sit around in our comfy offices and wait for the launch date as it would be the New Year's Eve. But the thing is that the sooner you get it out and really see how it acts in the wild, the better you will do and the faster feedback loops will you harvest from this specific research. I was just like a part of the call yesterday. We are launching like another AI builder infrastructure thing. And we did just like this preliminary website test 2 days before the launch. And as I showed it to a couple of my guys who are data scientists, they couldn't navigate it. And this was like a serious problem because we were launching in 2 days and people who are ideal ICP didn't know how to navigate through this website. So right now we are panicking and just kind of launching the stuff 2 days before our initial launch. Long story short is that as soon as you can try testing it with either prototypes or just like lo-fi versions of your product, the better and the safer you are that this thing is really going to land. And when it comes to just like selecting the right target audience for the launch, it's really important that we are not doing this, right? So we think that bankers, COOs are going to be our best target audiences, but that we are really testing multiple segments because our product vision may be to address one segment's problems, but then it turns out that there is like another segment with shorter sales cycles and higher willingness to pay that might be a better fit. And last but not least, Samantha, if we can just move to a couple of slides. And let's do the first one, please.
Yep, sorry.
Okay, super. So this is again like the product market fit cycle, and usually it takes 5 to 7 iterations to get those moving particles right. What I always say when I'm working with companies is that, okay, product market fit potentially is building the solution that solves problems to a specific audience, but can we as an company capture a part of this value that is being created in the system and build a sustainable business out of this? This is the pricing component. And oftentimes I see companies that are just like launching on product hunts or like through some sort of social media groups, and they end up with thousands of users registrations, and at the end of the day they maybe have 2 or 3 paying customers. So this is definitely something that we want to avoid, and we will talk more about how to test willingness to pay as soon as possible. Let's switch, please. Super. When it comes to target audience selection, again, these things cannot be done in isolation on the launch date by just like our best attempt that, hey, we are trying to solve the problems for people like us or a couple of past clients that we have had. We need to conduct serious research. And here, when it comes to research, oftentimes people try to avoid personal touch at all expense possible. So there are a lot of founders who don't want to do interviews, who would just like to run some ads, see what conversion happens on the website and try to reverse engineer this based on data. But in reality, we are always operating with a couple of biases, right? And whenever we are going to market with a radical innovation, the usual preferred go-to-market strategy is not to optimize for adoption from a get-go, but to use what is called a beachhead strategy. So I'm just like dealing with one of the companies in my portfolio, and it is an AI builder for LMS. So these are chatbots in normal human language for enterprise clients. And the initial idea was that they could be doing platform to cater like multiple use cases. But we somehow went and said that we have to prove monetary traction to be investable later on. So our first segment that we cater were actually banks in the European Union. Later on, we went to Swiss insurance companies, and now we are just like slowly and gradually building up market towards other use cases. But what is mission critical here is that you cannot just say, hey, I have this friend who works at the bank, why don't we build a project together? Because when you are building the reference, it attracts more of these cases. So you also need to make sure that you are dealing with a market which is fast growing, healthy, and has this amazing potential to refer each other's companies and new clients based on the preferences that you created. I have 2 more slides and then we're off for the next one. Can we please? Super.
Yes.
So there is just like this notion of early customer profile and ideal customer profile. Ben Williams in his recent Substack, How to Market to Developers, did a beautiful, just like differentiation, what are psychographics and traits of early customer profiles, because it's not always so that the first adopters will be those people who are like indie developers and love to try new stuff. There are other traits that we should consider. And oftentimes company ask me like, Maya, can I go and close a big corpo from a get-go? And I'm like, sure, of course, if you have the good proximity to the segment and you can build a solution which is 10 times better than their existing alternatives, that's super, please do it. But the majority of companies are not in this position, so they have to build use cases very gradually and move towards like more advanced market segments. This is why I always try to think that, okay, I have this ideal list of customers. So for me, they are maybe Mercedes-Benz. They are just like a couple of super innovation centers that I would like to work with. But in order to get there, I will probably have to work with a couple of VCs first and with a couple of, let's say, scale-ups and future unicorns, so that one day I will have the prerogative to be like top of the class when it comes to go-to-market strategy for, let's say, top corporate segments. I don't want that, but if I want it, that would be an ideal way to do so. So early customer profile is something that you have to do also in terms of just like making sure that you are creating monetizable traction. Why? And I mean, it's a horrible thing to say, but the last thing that you want to do, and it's definitely a good time to switch slides, is to what my friends call solves broke people problem. So problems that have like very low willingness to pay, that they are just like creating a gazillion of fake accounts because they don't want to pay for your solutions or something like that. This is a really tough market to compete on. So every time that we are doing this product market fit test, I love to pre-sell or at least like create a wait list or do any sort of other market validation which includes monetizable steps, because if I just do a survey or an interview or something like that, I am left with anecdotal proof. And especially if we are pre-seed or Series A, or just like somebody who considers themselves as a bootstrap business, we need to just like demonstrate early signals of a monetizable business. And that gets super difficult if you have this go-to-market motion in a bigger company, which is like more used to selling with resellers or sales-led stuff. And then they suddenly decide that they are going to do product-led, and just like the big clients, the big money turnover is not there. So it's absolutely essential to do this early customer discovery also in terms of testing the pricing. And 2 best questions to ask here is, how would you like to pay for it? And what would a fair amount to pay for it be? So we can talk about willingness to pay for ages. It's one of my favorite subjects. I'm sure that there will be like a couple of questions in the Q&A, but a key takeaway from this one is cool. Like there are so many segments out there. There are just like 2 important decisions to be taken lightly, because this is the segment that you will probably be stuck with for the next 3 months or something like that. So please use evidence, and whenever possible, try to test willingness to pay, because you might be building the wrong type of audience sometimes if you fail to do this. And that was like pretty much it from my side. when it comes to research and planning, again, like when we do this in practice with companies, we have 3 or 5 different hypotheses of what the ideal target market is. In reality, it gets more complicated because you are dealing with decision-making units and these sort of buying committees and influencers in the purchase. But in fundament, I think that these are really good fundamentals to build on.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I see a lot of questions are coming in for these, what you're speaking about, and we will
Excellent.
get to those after. And if whatever we don't get to at the end of the session, we will answer via email. But I want to hear some insight from Amelia. One of them that I'm really interested to understanding is your intake on the prioritization of delivery over discovery. And give us some insights on what are your research and planning methods.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of software companies operate in that way, that they actually don't do any discovery, right? They dive straight into the planning phase and then just focus on delivery. And in general, product teams are very output rather than outcome driven. So they care about whether the features have been shipped, whether the feature parity has been achieved, with the competitors. They're like essentially chasing each other with other companies, but they rarely pause to think whether this new feature that someone else had launched and that you don't know how it's being adopted is actually moving the needle in any way. And often as your product becomes bigger and bigger and more bloated, you can't even tease out like which of the features correlate with basically monetization. So, we are kind of part engagement, part analytics platform, and it's important for any product companies to analyze their user behavior, talk to their users about what kind of needs that they have that are currently not being served by the product could still be, served by the product, and, make sure that this is viable, that this can be actually put on the roadmap rather than just like blindly looking at what everyone else is shipping and focus on that. Again, we could be talking for 5 hours about discovery methods. There is a great book by Teresa Torres, Continuous Discovery method, and essentially you should be talking to your users all the time, and you should also be like watching your session recordings, looking at the engagement of your users with different features and the correlation between engagement and the monetization aspect, so trial to paid conversion, then also upgrades, renewals, etc.
Fantastic. Yes, I think we could go on for a while on this particular stage, but we're going to move on and bring to the product development stage and have our friend here, Emmett, lead us by, one of the top points in our pre-discussion that I thought was really interesting was this point on outsourcing product development. And what do you mean by that? And yeah, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's a common sort of mistake I see, usually kind of green entrepreneurs who are just kind of getting started and building a product, trying to bring something to market, is they think they can kind of just come to the market with an idea and outsource the development of the product, whether that's the actual software development or design, et cetera, outsource that to some sort of development agency. And I've seen so many people go astray doing this. It's not to say that you should never work with development agencies, but if you don't have actual development expertise on your team to be able to manage that, you're going to be in a world of hurt. And there's a few reasons for that. So one is that the path towards having a successful product is how tight your feedback loop is. And it's the same thing in terms of if you're testing new sort of go-to-market channels, right? Where you want to have a tight feedback loop to get information from the market and iterate your offer, your messaging, positioning, et cetera, right? And it's the same thing with product development. And the challenge when you're working with an external agency is the feedback loops aren't as tight, aren't as quick. And so you can't get as much information back into your development process as you would if you had someone just on your team. It's also much more expensive because you're paying someone, generally speaking. If they're local, it's going to be more expensive rates. And then if they're not local, there's a good chance that there's going to be some sort of big time zone difference, right? So it becomes very difficult to have sort of a tight feedback loop if you can only communicate with your development firm asynchronously. So like they develop something, they push it to some sort of staging environment, you kind of give some feedback, and then a day later they get your feedback, and a day later after that they put in their iterations. And that's even like if you're before going live. Then once you go live, you feed like customer feedback into that loop, and the loop gets even less tight, right? So I've seen so many people kind of fall into this trap of thinking, I'm the idea guy, I've got this great idea, I'm gonna hire an outsourced development firm who's gonna build this for me, and then you're paying out of pocket, which is expensive. Or I just need to go and raise some money from investors, and I'll hire someone to be my first developer, as opposed to recruiting like a technical co-founder who can build it with you. And maybe that's a little bit better than having an outsourced development firm. But then the problem there is the person who's the most important person for building the product, they don't have the same amount of skin in the game. And so this is just something I just see over and over and over again when trying to bring a new product to market. Someone has some sort of deep domain expertise in some sort of business domain and have an idea, which might be a very, very good idea, but they're totally green in terms of how to build a product, and they think that they can kind of just pay someone to solve that problem for them. So yeah, I see it just so many times. So
interesting. And also sticking with you on one other point here, sometimes you have here like expose your product to real users, but then we see sometimes teams or people have this belief that their product is not ready yet. Or, what are your thoughts around why you should be and what this allows you to do?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of like a form of procrastination that so on the flip side, like let's say you've got your own development in-house, and so the problem of dealing with an external development firm isn't an issue. And let's say you're a team of technical people and your comfort is in building product, and the way you feel as though you can provide value is by working on product. You're not comfortable with marketing or sales, for example. And so it's easy to kind of procrastinate by just this one more feature trap. Oh, we need one more feature. We need one more feature. We need to get to some level of feature parity with our competitors before we can go to market. And I think part of the reason that happens, there's a few reasons I think why that happens. One is they're just uncomfortable with sales and marketing, and they don't want to go out into the market. The other reason is kind of like a psychological fear of, as soon as you put it out into the market, then you're going to find out whether or not this is actually something people want. And it's hard to sort of live in that sort of startup fantasy of, we're going to have this big successful product. It's easier to live in that fantasy if you haven't actually exposed it to the market. But the only way you can get those feedback loops going, real feedback loops, is exposing it to like real users, real customers. Like all this like great advice around like testing willingness to pay as early as you can, et cetera. None of that can happen unless you're actually exposing your product to real customers and asking them to pay for what you've built. So it's a trap. It's a similar trap, but on the other end of the spectrum, that you have these technical people that they'll fall into this trap of, I'm just going to add one more feature. And yeah, it's a form of procrastination for technical founders.
Thank you for that. And Amelia, wanted to kick this back to you here on, what do we mean? Like, okay, if we build it, they will come. And why is that something that you should just not be believing?
Yeah, I mean, like, how would they come? How would they know that you've built something? First of all, as I mentioned, like every marketing channel you're going to be in now is going to be super crowded. Like, especially now since AI has become so widely available and there are so many tools. There are like, serverless or servers, backend as a service companies. You can do pretty much everything without as much investment as you used to need to develop a product just a couple of years ago. So the competition has become even fiercer. There are literally new products in the same categories popping up every week. So how would your target audience know that you've built something? This is just not happening. You need to promote your product, you need to have a go-to-market strategy, and you need to have a go-to-market strategy that is aligned with your resources. Kind of to comment on what Emmett said about the MVP and the next feature trap, and we are often talking about this killer feature fallacy, that there will be this one more killer feature that we need to build until we can launch, so the product goes viral and everything just keeps rolling on its own. It's almost never happening, right? These are complete outliers that we may have heard about because they're so exciting that the tech journalists are reporting on them. It almost never happens. Well, you do need a modicum of like a minimum lovable product, so the product has to work. And a common mistake that I see here that startups make is that they spread themselves too thinly and they try to catch up with companies that have been in the market for 10 years and replicate like all their features, but they do it kind of in a half-baked way, right? So they're building a lot too much, but of too low quality for the product to be actually viable when going to market. Coming kind of back to the original question, yeah, absolutely, we do need a go-to-market strategy. And yeah, do you want me to take on the onboarding part now, or?
Yes, you could shed some light, or we could, that's a good segue also into marketing and positioning, because we have a ton, as you know, to share on that point. But if you want to mention something quickly on onboarding, feel free.
Yeah, I just see it here on the slide, but I think it makes sense to talk about marketing actually before
Yes,
onboarding.
agreed. Okay, so we all know that onboarding, we need it. We all use our products and it goes a long way. And constantly, again, testing and redoing your onboarding is helpful and experimenting with it. But on that note, we're going to bring in back Maya into the discussion. We're going to take the first half and then Amelia is going to take the second half. So should I start sharing the examples, or do you want to go through?
It's better. Yeah, the people
Yes.
look at this, what is written on the slides here. Yeah, just it's fine. Otherwise, thank you so much for excellent collaboration in the Q&A section. I was almost sweating as I was answering all your queries. So keep them going, keep them flowing. We're going to have a fun Q&A, but not before I bore you a little bit with positioning. So what is positioning? Positioning is actually how we are perceived by our target audiences and all the other stakeholders in the ecosphere that we are creating. The problem with positioning is that it happens whether we control it or not. So people are always going to formulate some sort of opinion and impressions. So guess what? It's better to control it. Where to start when we are thinking about positioning, surprise with your unique value added. So what are you doing for folks? And if you're new to market, you need to be 10x of the existing competitors. So the first question that we are asking ourselves is just like, what are the alternative solutions to what we are doing? For example, if you are a cool AI tool in the LinkedIn commenting space, then you are thinking, how are people doing this job at the moment? Scenario A, they are doing manual comments such as me. I'm a little bit analog when it comes to this. Scenario B, Taplio. Scenario 3, maybe just like a little bit of a hooked Notion page and a couple of automation that they have DIY plus summarizing ChatGPT. But not every alternative is the same in terms of fulfilling audiences' needs. So we need to understand what are the criteria that actually matters to our folks, how they are making purchasing decisions, and based on where our competitors stand, and based on what the added value is when we are creating, we are selecting this space when we have the best chance to win. It's either like based on one benefit that we are positioning, or that we can build be like totally better than an existing competitor and like we are totally 10x with that. I was just like on one call today, and they are just like a cool software in terms of providing benefits for employees. And they have a very wide portfolio of offers, so restaurants, manicures, hairdressers, everything. And their competitor only has gyms, so sport membership. So their positioning is going to be what? Yeah, not everybody likes sports. In order to create meaningful benefits for your employees, you should create a broader spectrum in order to do that, right? And here is the second part of the positioning. Not every feature that we are doing is equally important. So when we are building something, there are must-haves, features that we just must need to have them working, and they are not our differentiators. So they are not going to make anybody select us instead of other solutions, but we need them in order to play the game. On the other end, we have differentiators. So for example, like we said, with this benefit solution that they have broader offers. So this can be used in order to create unique value proposition and later on unique selling proposition. What's the difference? We don't have chat because otherwise I would give a book to whoever would explain me this difference. So, okay, if somebody answers it, I can do it post-mortem. But the thing is that, look, when it comes to unique value proposition, it is something that we do very well that matters to the audience, right? So this is the value that we are providing, and our audience says, yes, I value this specific value added. Cool. What is unique selling proposition is literally our answers to why us. So why are we the best company in the space in order to solve this problem? And positioning, again, as we are thinking about this, is persona specific, is target audience specific. Why? Because if I'm dealing with a bank chief of security on one side, and if I am dealing with, let's say, an influencer partner on the other side, those people, if I have multiple personas in my product, they will need different positioning, but I will still be willing to just like have unique positioning for the company. So positioning is a multiple level. You can have it for different personas, for different products, and there are a lot of positionings going on in the companies at the same time. Imagine it like a hybrid matrix, but we still need to say very compellingly what we are working on without using all these gibberish industry buzzwords and whatnot. So 1, 2, 3, what is it and what can you do for me? This is the magic of a good headline and a clear positioning. So what else is true? Positioning is relative. It's relative to the buyer's needs as well as competitors. And whenever something changes in our landscape, or as we are evolving the product, we need to reconsider the positioning. And I see a lot of this stuff going on in AI space right now. No? So suddenly everybody is AI driven just for the sake of having AI. So I am very, very, very diligent and surgical. Okay, you have AI, so what? Like, what benefit does it bring to me as a user? Is this really a differentiator, or is just like something which is cool and the Empower investor want it? So no more positioning ranked. We can talk about this later on. But yeah, positioning is a really cool subject. Definitely don't leave it out. And then we have like one additional question in the chat, which I thought it is really cool. And Emilia, if you want, you can talk so much more about this because you have all this SEO knowledge that I try to neglect exist. But nevertheless, let me just walk through a couple of go-to-market motion first. So basically, it comes down to 7 choices that you could be making when you are going to market. The first one is inbound. Emilia can answer beautifully about inbound and everything content related and SEO created. I'm not an expert in this field. Second one is outbound. This is what I like, because in a matter of 1 month, we can build a couple of million in sales pipeline. This is quick if it is done right. So I very much like and appreciate that when it comes to B2B. The third one is paid digital. Paid digital is often a bias that many technical founders have when they just say, oh, cool, let's spend 2,000 euros, let's attract like 2,000 people on the website and see what happens. Yes, good in theory, but the problem is that you will never understand why certain thing happens. So if you see a conversion rate 1%, how will you know that this is something which going on and maybe you attracted the wrong audience, maybe the messaging was off, maybe the offer sucked. So definitely not great for discovery, but excellent when you are scaling. Fourth element, communities. Communities, especially in the tech space, are absolutely invaluable. You can either penetrate external communities relevant to your target audience, or you can start building your own communities, even for beta users or your raving fans or whatever. So communities are just in some sort of industry, even knowledge centers for how to use the product. Especially if you are in the high-tech space, this is very good channel to consider. However, if you're just starting out, it's better to do value commenting and penetrating existing communities than to go and invite your 10 friends into building another Facebook group. Cool. On the partnership side, I think that Elliot can tell a lot about this because they are like affiliate and referrals and whatnot. But long story short, if somebody else already owns your audience and you are kind of compatible in terms of what you're offering, why not partnering up, right? So it will save you a lot of hassle and it can even fuel your credibility. Cool. The next one is account-based marketing / selling. I know that every time that I mention outbound, people get a little bit insane and no, I'm not a spammer. I will not send thousands of emails. No. So I'm like, cool. If you don't like to do it in volume, then we can do it surgically. We can select a couple of target accounts. We can study them. We can like really qualify them when they are in the good shape to react. And then we create tailored sales and marketing campaigns in order to convert them. It's very powerful channel, especially if you are selling to enterprise. It's almost the only channel that you can have if you are just starting out. And last but not least, cool new kid in the bog, product-led growth, which probably everybody is hoping to do. But nevertheless, product-led growth is so connected with time to value and with just like our ability to do the onboarding really well, because sometimes we end up in these zombie products where like we just get lost and we don't know what to do there and what is it does for there. So I'm really happy that later on Samantha and Emilia can just like double down, because just for me, the most important metric in product-led growth is literally time to value. Do I get it or not? Do I care about this? Will I be encouraged to return this? And then I think the next chart is really important for the person in the chat who asked like existing market or new market. Whenever I'm dealing with the existing market, and right now as I'm working in ECG, so this is some weird European regulation, you don't have to care about a lot about this if you're from the US, but it's a sustainability thing, a new law in the European Union. And like I had a case when we just posted something on Facebook and got 40 enterprise leads. So we were panicking how to get all these offers because the area is so hot, right? It was just like this overheated market with a short window of opportunity, of course, but very nice. In other cases, like with cybersecurity or something like that, or CRMs, really like saturated markets, we have to really work in order to build the demand, like to do differentiation and to really do so much more in terms of product than if we would just be catering this hungry, unfulfilled niche. We can talk about this later, but just like if you're new to market, maybe just like demand generation will be a little bit easier and you will have like a little bit better chance of getting somebody on the call with outbound thingies. But if you are in the more saturated market, positioning and differentiation is literally the name in the game. Plus, you need to work much harder in terms of building the basic assets because people are much more informed when it comes to decision making. Sorry, next slide. Emilia.
Yes, no, thank you. We love that you listed it out in the way that you did. Very informative. But now we're going to move over to Emilia. So please take the stage.
Thank you. I tried to adjust my input volume settings while I was talking, so I hope this is a little better. Can someone let me a thumbs up on the chat if you can hear me better now?
a little bit lower maybe. So if you don't, I don't know if you need to hold it.
Okay, I'm just, because I can't
This is
hear
perfect.
myself. So, okay, great, awesome. So yeah, marketing and positioning, like what are the mistakes? So the first one is sort of covering, partly what Maya has already discussed in terms of positioning. And, this also dovetails with what Emmett said about and what I said about like going too broad on the feature set, especially initially when you have limited resources and procrastinating the launch because you need to build one more feature. So going too broad instead of niching down before you have even launched is the first biggest mistake that I see, startups make. They want to appeal to the broadest possible market, the broadest possible audience, instead of like focusing on one niche and catering to these, essential use cases, plus maybe picking something, as Maya mentioned, else that is going to differentiate them from these much larger products that are catering to everyone because they can. Right. So for instance, if you take this phenomenon of unbundling, right, and you take a Google Sheets or Airtable, you can do everything in Google Sheets or Airtable, but it doesn't mean that this is the best tool to, manage your customers in, right? Companies agree that Google Sheets are not the best CRM, right? But you could do it. You could do it in Notion. You could do it in Airtable. Why don't you do it, right? And that may be like a very high level example, but I just wanted to say that yes, start with a puddle, right? Then move to a lake and a sea and ocean, and that often sort of reflects itself in very vague positioning, right? That is sort of we cater to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, or with catchphrase filled positioning like disrupt the future of PLG with AI, and nobody knows what you're actually doing. I've actually seen the opposite trend, luckily, on some websites. I love the example of Cognism. I keep bringing it all up. It literally says, we give you B2B companies' phone numbers that you want to make business with, as their headline, as their H1. And I think it's amazing because I land on their website, and within the 8 seconds that a user typically spends on someone's website hero header, I immediately know what they are offering, what their product does, instead of having to scroll back and forth, click through 5 different tabs, and I still have no idea, right? So this mistake, again, hard to fix once you're years deep in development. Typically, it's something you should do very early on at this early stage of planning. It will make everything downstream easier and cheaper because you will be able to do more of these user interviews. You will have a more focused target market. So with the very, very limited resources that you typically have at the beginning, it will be easier to pick the right channels. And mistake number 2, the more distribution channels, the better, because you need to test, right? And you need to throw spaghetti at the wall. Actually, I made a mistake here. I should have written user pilot in 2020 or 2019, even not in 2022. That was a bit earlier when, we kind of just launched in 2019, and we were doing that for a while. Throwing spaghetti at the wall and testing all the different channels. I don't believe you need to test all the different channels. You need to, again, take a step back and think what you have the budget and resources for to use and what is going to give you the highest return on your time investment, right? Some channels are more kind of peculiar than others. For instance, outbound sales kind of follows this normal distribution curve in terms of difficulty and in terms of the return on investment. So initially, when you started doing founder-led sales, and you do the outbound sales, but initially to your community, maybe to your early adopters or your alpha testers, right? And you leverage the community that you actually have built while doing research around your product. It's easier and it's faster and it's much cheaper. But then when you start actually growing your team, investing in tool stacks, investing in an outbound team, it becomes super expensive. And for a very long time, you're not going to make the messaging right. You will struggle with these super noisy channels with all the restrictions on email deliverability, right? You will need to warm up 5 different domains. It's super expensive. So that's when it becomes diminishing returns, and you immediately know that at this stage in your product growth, you don't have the money to do outbound, right? So first you can do outbound until you have, like exhausted your immediate community and your kind of personal target audience, because you need these initial users to start. You need them to test your product. You need them to get some feedback, and ideally, if they're paying you, because then they will be a lot more committed to actually use your product than the free testers or free trial users. Okay, then what is the next channel that is going to bring you the highest ROI? Like until recently, or maybe until now, I would say that SEO was the channel where you could get the highest ROI with like the lowest investment. Of course, SEO can be super expensive as well. It again depends on your niche. It depends on how saturated it is, how strong your competitors are, etc., etc. It's becoming increasingly more exhausted, and now with SG rolling out, the real estate in Google is also rapidly shrinking. So instead of 10 organic search results in the first SERPs page, the first results page, you're going to have 4, right? You're going to have more ads. Like essentially all the search engines, all the social media channels are trying to monetize their users more and more. And that's why you will see diminishing returns on most channels, right? Communities, as Maya said, leverage existing communities instead of trying to start your own, because this is more than a full-time job for more than one person. It may think to you, it may appear to you, you may think that, oh, I will just start a Facebook group, and then, again, I will build it and they will come. They won't come. You need to, it's a separate product. Essentially, a community is a standalone product, which you need to keep investing in and keep growing. It's not going to happen on its own. Like even at this stage in user pilot, I think we had 3 attempts to build a community, 1 on Facebook, 1 on Discord, and 1 on Slack. And we failed every single time because we never had a dedicated person to do this. And it always fell through the cracks among other priorities, right? It's a very difficult channel to grow and scale. So before you start, throwing spaghetti at the wall and spreading yourself so thinly that you don't see any results in any of these channels, like do this mental math, right? Do some research. How saturated are the channels, right? Are there existing, communities, existing influencers with basically the following in my very narrow niche that I can already leverage, right? If I decide to invest in SEO, right? How much resources can I dedicate, and what is my chance of ranking compared to like our competitors in the market? Okay, like analyze these channels instead of experimenting with them blindly, because it's not going to work, and you don't have the expertise and you don't have the budget to buy the expertise initially to do a lot of channels properly. We made this mistake, as I said, in 2020, almost led me to quit. I was like, I didn't think this is going anywhere at this point, and we hired a consultant, former VP of marketing at a very successful SaaS company that scaled fast. He already had an exit, bought himself a vineyard, and decided to basically just do consulting from time to time. And he said, like, why don't you focus on what is already working? For us at that point, that was SEO. And for the next 2 years, we did nothing but SEO content, pretty much. We scrapped all the webinars. We scrapped, we did run Google Ads, but that's a similar channel, right? Because you're still capturing demand from search engines. But we didn't do anything else until we have gotten enough traction in this channel and we have kind of built a scalable system. So we had the funds and the capacity to hire people to kind of leverage the next channel. Okay, and then mistake number 3, only investing in channels where you can attribute 100% of your revenue and accurately project the ROI. Right, this is, I know a lot of people are trying to do that, a lot of tools are trying to do that, but this is never gonna 100% work in marketing. And to just give you examples, Just in April, we had 5 demos from webinars. That's around 5,000 worth of demos if we were to convert it into, like the advertising cost. And all these webinars happened in 2023. What happened in between? Probably 100 different touch points, right? This is like first touch conversion model here. These people came first for the webinar, then they took a long detour, right? Had a long sort of user journey before they ultimately decided they're ready to take the relationship to the next level and actually start the sales process. Same with conversions from essentially both Google Ads and organic traffic, right? Like 54% of our conversions from Google Ads come from branded campaigns. So someone must have heard about us from another channel. How do we know which one? Right? Super difficult to attribute that. 9.5% of organic conversions also from direct. What could it be? Word of mouth, demand gen activities, social media activities. It's all something that you can't attribute 100%. So if you're going to be only focusing on what is bringing this last touch conversion, like the immediate ROI, you're never going to like have the creativity, have the room to experiment with, what else might be working. And I know this advice might seem a little bit mutually exclusive with what I said before, right? So before I said, yeah, focus on one channel until you have nailed it. So yeah, this is kind of advice I would say for a bit later stages of your journey, but don't discourage channels where you can't attribute the ROI directly, especially at later stages when you already have proven and scaled one of them. Samantha, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. So I think that marketing section was fantastic and all those examples, and we are at 9 minutes left of the webinar. So I'm going to maybe move along some of the last few slides so that we could at least leave like a few minutes for a few questions. But for the sales and distribution side to it, similar, we were talking about, more channels is not always the best. We will also share these slides after with the audience. But Emmett, I really liked on our call when you talked about using personal profiling. So do you just want to share a minute on what you mean by this?
Yeah, so I think again, like if you're dealing with, say, like someone who's technical founder, not super comfortable in marketing, I think it's something you kind of just gotta get over. In kind of like, let's say like the indie hacker space, there's a lot of this sort of movement of like build in public. So that's more sort of the Twitter audience, and then in LinkedIn, you see a lot of people like building these personal brands, and this is pretty effective, right? And I think the reason behind this is because people don't want to follow a brand, right? They want to follow people, they relate to people. And so I think there's a lot to be said for building a personal brand and in the early stages, right? So I'm not sure exactly where it caps out, but like certainly the first couple million in ARR, it's probably going to be a little bit of a cult of personality. You're mostly relying on performance marketing, stuff that is a little bit more attributable. So like Google Ads and SEO. And then as Amelia was saying, like after that, it starts to get harder to attribute. And maybe that's the stage where you start to rely less on sort of that founder-led cult of personality. So like for us, we've found that, for example, if we're trying to get traction on posts on LinkedIn, let's say for organic social, even on paid social, if we're sharing stuff from my personal profile or somebody else on the team's personal profile, it'll get way more engagement than if we're trying to do it through the Rewardful branded accounts. And I think it's just someone sees like a brand logo and they kind of, their eyes glaze over. But if they see a person's face, oh, I follow them, I recognize them, they're much more likely to engage with that content. And then the downstream impact of that is if you're doing outbound sales, anything like that, customer calls, everything just gets a little bit easier. You're going to have a higher percentage of people are going to accept your connection requests if they recognize your content. They're more likely to look at your DMs if they've seen good content from you, and so forth. So I think there's a lot to be said for kind of like trying to build this sort of cult of personality as sort of a beginning part of any kind of organic social or even paid social stuff that you do.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm sure Maya and Amelia also, because they are really fantastic at profiling and making sure that their voice is out there on social. But we're going to then move on. It probably due to time, Maya, I think we're going to just skip over to our.
So can I just say this one and then throw me out on whatever else,
Okay,
because I really have to tell people how to make money before the product even exists.
Okay.
So welcome to the
going.
wonderful world of phantom products. This is the ultimate test of willingness to pay when I try to pre-sell even without having this product ready. So the first example here is just like a Google Doc of a program that I did for freelancers, local program that is, and this draft alone, we made more than 70K with this project last year. And it all started as this like long page in Google Doc. And this was pre-sold for 30K before we ever developed the product. Next example, Notion page of one of my boot camps. Overall value of it now, as it is offered with a digital product, is 50K. But the program was developed after we have pre-sold the tuition. So we didn't want to just like go and lock ourselves in the room and do 3 months of research. We needed to know that there is a demand for it and not say, yes, Maya, really cool program. Maybe I would attend, but really test willingness to pay. Last but not least, these are a couple of snippets from one of my clients who is in this VR space, augmented reality. So this is their corporate video. And by doing outbound and showing this corporate video, we created a pipeline of 1.5 million within the last 2 weeks. So stuff is totally powerful. You don't have to do like live demos all the time. You can pre-sell with something as simple as a freaking Google Doc or a video. So whatever you do, it's never too late, too early to test willingness to pay. I just wanted to share these examples because they are very encouraging.
No, and I thank you for making sure that happened, because of course that's why everyone has signed up. So we will then continue here and just move on to our last stage here, the feedback and optimization. I'm going to stay with you, Maya, and let's talk about soliciting feedback from various stakeholders, and also this, it sounds easy, but making it easy for teams to organize feedback, and just any thoughts you had on here.
Yeah, real quick. So whenever we are doing like our landing pages and home pages or whatnot, it needs to be clear with all the stakeholders that will be using it. And even within the product, you know what, a finance person can come and take it for a spin. An agency can come and considers it to be like a very good product to do referrals with. So you never know with whom you are dealing. And instead of just like testing your stuff with a couple of your friends, God forbids your mother, you should be very focused on your ideal customer profile, and B, also comprehend who are other stakeholders in the ecosystem, because journalists, investors, and whatnots will be playing around with your product as well as competitors. So make sure that we know who is playing around with product, that we are good with the segmentation, and that everybody like gets it and has like good time to value. And when it comes to just like this feedback and whatnot, it's really important to capture it as insights, so that we don't end up with just like these huge banks of customer discovery notes, or God forbid, just recordings without any transcripts and note taking. It's really important to systemize this. But luckily, there are cool solutions such as User Pilot and users that make this life a little bit easier for us. Because if I told you how many Google Forms I have with feedback from my clients, you would be probably disgusted. So moving forward to just like talking good practices, how to collect you to organize users' feedback.
Yes. And on that note, with actually you're mentioning Google Docs, spreadsheets, like our recent client was telling us how over the last 3 years, they were able to kind of reduce their UAT, converting completely their use of spreadsheets and emails to actual visual feedback that could then be routed back to their internal teams. And they were able to reduce that by 20% and then completing their projects on a more on-time basis. And throughout our whole conversation, we've been talking about testing willingness to pay. Also, you're testing your product before it goes. And these are these important components. And platforms like UserStep and UserPilot help your teams scale and organize. And then another component I see that my last thing I'm going to mention here is that, the integration parts, and that's something that we're always focusing on. It's because your developers are your PMs are allowing your developers to become more user-centric, basically. You are showing them exactly, here is what the user feedback is visually, and they're understanding better how the user is using your product versus when we're just writing a requirement that is needed. So there's really bridging that gap, and we really like to work on these types of integrations to organize and be able to scale the feedback. So on that note, I think we have a good idea on how we could answer these 7 questions that are left in the Q&A. We will release it via email, some answers or some video clips on social so that we can make sure and get there. But I want to adhere to the time and be respectful. So want to thank everyone for joining us today, and also our panel for all of your prep work and the content that you shared today. So thank you so much.
Thank you for
Thanks,
coming. It's
Samantha.
been a blast.
Okay,
Thank
thank you, Emmett. Thank you, everyone.
Cheers, bye.
Bye.